What's up, metalheads? Welcome to the Scrap Metal Podcast, the show for the misfits who've been listening to the same music since high school. I'm your host, John von Frankenstein, and joining me today is my metal thrashing mad co-host, Chris. Chris, I gotta ask you, man, how you feeling?
I gotta say, I'm feeling sophisticated.
Sophisticated. I see, again, another visual joke that will not work now that people can actually see how you're dressed. But I do like the stripes. Okay, I like the plaid. The plaid is very sophisticated. I dig it. The beard is kept up, right? Everything is trimmed. The glasses look super spiffy. Chris, does this feeling of sophistication have anything to do with how you're keeping your heavy metal street cred?
It might have something to do with my heavy metal street
Maybe.
So,
okay, you keep your secrets.
So a week ago, with some coworkers, we had had a very successful fiscal year, a very successful busy season. We decided we were going to go out to a nice fancy steak dinner. I ended up ordering something else because I don't eat steak. But we went out, had a very fancy, very expensive dinner. And while there, I hear the music playing in this restaurant, and I can't really hear the music, but I can kind of hear the bass line. And I'm like, this kind of sounds like this band Big D and the Kids Table, who is a third wave ska band. And I'm like, but that can't be right. I'm at a fancy restaurant, in Melville on 110. Like, they're not playing Big D. That makes no sense. A couple songs later, I very clearly hear the song Beer by Real Big Fish. And I'm like, oh, that was Big D. They're playing third wave ska.
Someone here is a fan.
Yeah, exactly. And I, once I realized it was Beer, I very much had to resist the urge to put on a fedora and reveal checkered print and start skanking in the middle of this fancy restaurant. It was really tough to not do that. But I was so surprised to be sitting there eating this really good food. The dessert was my favorite part. Nutella-filled donuts. It was amazing.
Oh,
covered in brown sugar and cinnamon. There was caramel sauce and whipped cream. Incredible. But between beer and the donuts, I very much was trying not to just start skanking and moshing in the middle of this restaurant. And so I guess my restraint is kind of my street cred, how I kept some street cred.
The fact that you were able to keep it together.
Yeah.
Yeah. The fact that you didn't embarrass everybody there at the table.
Exactly.
I applaud you. I applaud you for your efforts.
Thank you.
And braver than any U.S. Marine, honestly. I feel like I would have probably fallen under the same thing, if I had been sitting at the table of this TGI Fridays that you were at, and if Down with the Sickness came on, or fucking Dig by Mudvayne or something like that.
Yep.
Because where you love ska and ska just sends your whole body into skank mode, I love early 2000s new metal and mall goth metal. And we've talked about this love before, like we discussed back in our What's Old is New episode way back when. What was that, episode 15 or episode 16?
Something like that. Yep.
Something like that. New listeners, why don't you go ahead and explore it? Just go back in our catalog and find that one. But we talked about in that episode how new metal is back in a big way. And to make the return that much more clear, the Sick New World Festival just boasted a lineup that was chock full of everyone that you could think of from the early 2000s, all of the staple new metal bands, a roster that would have made any early 2000s Hot Topic employee just cream their pants completely. So in that episode, I had kind of come up with the opinion that the new metal big four consisted of Korn, Limp Bizkit, Linkin Park, and Slipknot. And TikTok was a tizzy. People were furious because there's lots of opinions around this, right? You're talking about the big four, who are the most important bands. And that's exactly what we're going to be discussing in this episode. Our theme for today is going to be the new metal big four. Who are the bands that make up the new metal big four, and what are their lasting influences and the impressions that they've had on the music genre as a whole? And before, Chris, I ask you for your opinion, I have to point out the skeleton onesie that I'm wearing here as tribute to my man Wes Borland, who is going to be brought up in this episode. That's why I've got the bunny on board too. Chris, are you? I'm sure that you're so happy that we're talking about nu metal because, as any dedicated scrap metal podcast listener knows, it's one of your favorite genres too.
Yeah, I would say I am moderately excited to talk about the nu metal Big Four. Yes, in the What's Old is New episode, we established that I don't have the connection and the attachment to nu metal that someone like yourself or so many other metalheads have. I took a different path to my love of thrash and heavy metal.
Right.
But as a fan of music, I love arguing. So
it's what we do best.
That's
what we do best.
Like you said, the comments were saying, how can you forget this band? Or how can you put this band in the Big Four and not this one? That's the argument people who listen to this music love to have. We love to argue, why do you like this band instead of this band? How can you say that this band is more influential than this one? So in that case, I am excited.
Right, okay. But that's a really fair point because it is a discussion that we have all the time. That's why there's, we have the Teutonic Big Four, the Canadian Big Four, the OG Big Four. Everyone wants to be in on the conversation of who are the most influential bands, who has the most lasting impression on the genre, and like who's more deserving to be in that top 4 spot, right? That's exactly why we have this kind of conversation and why I wanted to kind of dive back into this, because I think we had come up with it as like a clip and that's what we had posted to TikTok. And like, I didn't expect to get the sort of reaction that we got. I thought that everyone was kind of going to be on board. And I was excited to see that there were those differing opinions, which is exactly why I wanted to revisit the topic today. Not just for an opportunity to dress like Wes Borland and bring out my my lawn ornament bunny, which, quick tangent, I stole this thing when I was like 13 off of someone's lawn. I feel terrible about it now, but I've had it since then. It's been with me for this long. I was a hoodlum, like a little. I wasn't a hoodlum. God. I wasn't a hoodlum at all. I wasn't. No, I had no street cred back then. But it was more so like, oh, that looks like the bunny that Wes keeps on his amplifier. Let me go grab that. I'm so sorry if you're listening to this, the person whose bunny I stole. I apologize. I'm sure they found us somehow.
Absolutely. They're coming for you now.
I also want to take a second to point out that a lot of the research that I did on some of the background information about nu metal as a whole came from the New British Canon's video on nu metal and what brought us to nu metal. He's got a great page on YouTube. He has a great YouTube channel, and I've watched so many different genre explorations through his channel. So if you want like some supplementary material to go to, definitely check out New British Canon's video on how we got to nu metal, or before nu metal was nu metal. It's something along those lines. But before we get into the meat of the episode, Chris, why don't we do a quick review for everyone on what nu metal actually is and how that differs from other genres? What would you say are like the staple points of nu metal?
I would say, and I remember even in our What's Old is New episode, my opinion of nu metal is different from, I think, even yours, because when you mention a band like Limp Bizkit being nu metal, when I've seen people try and throw Kid Rock around, even as nu metal, to me has always been more of a, it's not really like, I get where you're coming from, but no. My opinion was always that someone like Limp Bizkit is rap metal, and to me, nu metal was always more of like Slipknot.
Right.
I always felt that Slipknot was more metal, nu metal,
Okay.
Even a band that I feel like I've seen them mentioned before, but I also feel like I don't hear them mentioned as much. So even a band like Disturbed, that was a band that I really enjoyed that was more metal, nu metal, and didn't lean into the hip hop aspect the way some other bands did. But I guess it was kind of that melding of taking what came before, whether that was grunge or whether that was heavy metal, tuning the guitars down and just playing this really heavy sound, this really heavy music, because you just wanted to sound heavier than the guys that came before. And I think that's kind of what happens with any style of music. But, Yeah, I think that's one of the interesting things about nu metal is that it gave us even lower tuned guitars, and just had those sludgy metal guitars.
Right. Where, like, I feel like a band like Limp Bizkit would be considered nu metal because I also see nu metal as being that melding of the metal and hip hop worlds in the way that bands were doing it before we even had nu metal.
Yeah.
And when I talk about bands who did this before nu metal, I'm talking about bands like Faith No More. The Beastie Boys were even, mixing together hip hop and metal. They were sampling Black Sabbath. They were sampling Zeppelin. They had Kerry King on No Sleep Till Brooklyn. And what created such a crossover hit for them was that they were kind of non-threatening in a way.
Yeah.
It was easier for suburban youth to listen to the Beastie Boys than it was to listen to, let's say, like West Coast hip hop. Maybe something that was easier for them to get their hands on and like not have their parents flip out. But you did see a lot of that kind of influence too. You got a lot of the influence from the gangster rap, right? Quote unquote, coming up in nu metal and before nu metal. And even before that, you had Run DMC. Sure, like Walk This Way was a huge crossover hit. Really in large part due to Aerosmith's involvement in the song. Now they're able to play that song on like classic rock radio.
Yeah.
Even though you've got Run DMC on it. But even before they did that, you had Rockbox, which was also, another song with like heavy metal guitar solo in it, but they're rapping in the song and it's Run DMC. It's fucking awesome. Public Enemy is also another band where they were bringing in sort of metal influences and like this metal abrasiveness, right? Like the attitude and the aggression was definitely there, even though it was more straight ahead hip hop. And then you had a lot of the groove metal bands like White Zombie, you had Helmet as well, which all of these different elements are what wound up bringing us to nu metal. Like it's very easy to see like how a song like We Care a Lot or Epic by Faith No More brought us to, Break Stuff by Limp Bizkit. I love when we do these episodes where we get to kind of see the trajectory, how like nu metal started to break things down to its simplest elements, where it was just a like rhythm and groove based genre, which pulled in the metal influences that a lot of these artists really loved. Chris, you've said this before. Bands that were inventing thrash were not listening to thrash when they invented it. So bands that invented nu metal, quote unquote, were not listening to nu metal. They were listening to everything that came before it and everything that they pulled from. They were listening to hip hop. They were listening to thrash metal and hardcore, and then just coming up with their own genre. And they were also deconstructing things. Like people talk about how grunge killed hair metal, right? The over-the-top guitar solos, the crazy outfits and the spandex and stuff got stripped away, and it was just a guitar with some fuzz on it and distortion and like loud drums and screaming, right?
Yeah.
And then nu metal was like, we could do you one even fucking better. Yeah. And was like, we're going to have no fucking guitar solos. All of the guitar parts are just going to sound like turntables, and like the West Coast hip hop thing that like Dr. Dre was really famous for. It almost sounds like a theremin. You know what I'm talking about? Like that.
I think I
kind of sound.
Yeah.
You had it's like in Gin and Juice and shit like that.
Yeah.
Where, like you have that all the time. Nothing but a G thing, like, or G thang. I feel weird saying thang. But yeah, eventually we got there, and that's where we got the nu metal big four. But in proclaiming that Korn, Limp Bizkit, Linkin Park, and Slipknot are the big four for nu metal, I guess the question has to be asked, why? Why do I feel so passionately about this? Why are we even discussing it? And I think that a lot of it comes down to the fact that before these bands were around, everyone was looking for a way to mix these styles together. Once these bands came out onto the scene, everyone was trying to emulate what they were doing because it was very clear that they had perfected that formula. So, Chris, what is your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's hard to argue, including bands like Korn, Linkin Park, Limp Bizkit, and Slipknot as the new metal big four, because I think especially like a band like Korn, they did it first. So how do you not include them? It's not like the case of a band like maybe Anvil or Venom, who were doing what would become speed metal and thrash metal, but didn't have the commercial success that a band like Metallica did. Korn did it first and found success doing it first. Yeah. And so even though...
And notoriety doing it first.
And so even though I do not listen to Korn and find Jonathan Davis's voice to be one of the most annoying things on the planet, probably second only to Dave Mustaine, I find it hard to argue not including a band like Korn in the new metal big four, because they did it first. They literally invented the genre, and and they did it so well that they had that success. You know, unlike bands that maybe invented other genres that didn't find the success, these guys did it and they were like, yeah, this is fucking, I don't know what they called it when they did it, but eventually we're like, that's new metal. That's what Korn is doing. And that's what everyone who has come out since Korn is trying to do. They're just trying to be Korn.
Right. It's like, I mean, to bring it back to the hip hop world, NWA was not making gangster rap. Gangster rap is what we called it after NWA. They came out and they were like, no, this is reality rap. Yeah. We are rapping what our lives are. We are talking about what we experience day in and day out. So to them, it was reality rap. It wasn't until it found success that they were like, oh, this is gangster rap, you know? Yeah. So it was the same thing with nu metal. Like, I've never thought about that. Like, what was nu metal called to the bands that were doing it back then? Maybe slam metal, because I know slam metal and like groove metal was a term that was thrown around back then. It's still kind of thrown around. Like, if you think of like White Zombie, right, is groove metal, basically, because they're not fully industrial. They're not fully heavy metal. Some of their earlier stuff was a little bit more straight ahead metal. But when you think of like their big classic albums, it's Thunder Kiss, fucking like that song alone. Dun, 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 like it's all the fucking groove, right? It's the bounce. And like, I don't know, I would be so curious to see like what they referred to the genre as before it was dubbed nu metal. Because even that title, I mean, Korn's debut album, that we're talking about 1994.
Yeah.
Were they calling it nu metal in 1994? I don't think so.
I doubt it. They were probably just calling it metal.
Metal or alternative metal.
Yeah, or alternative rock, or I mean, even alternative rock is not accurate, but since when are fucking genre labels accurate? When you have people that don't listen to the music trying to label it, you're never going to get an accurate label, because people call,
very true.
You know, people call Metallica death metal if they don't listen to metal. So it would have been interesting to know what did they consider themselves, because you know, we've talked about how Lemmy never considered Motorhead metal. They were a rock and roll band. Mm-hmm. So do these guys kind of do the same thing? They're like, we're not trying to play any style. We're not trying to invent a style. We're just trying to play music that we love. And if other people love it, great. If not, who cares? We're making stuff for us. We are the intended audience that we're making this music for.
Right, exactly. And I mean, so let's get into the meat of it. Let's talk about this band that we've spent so much time building up, and Chris, I'm sure time that you want to spend breaking down. But let's talk about Korn. Korn, consisting of the lineup of Jonathan Davis as their singer, their guitarists Monkey and Head, bassist Fieldy, and drummer David Silveria, the only dude that kind of sort of had a simple name, right? I guess Jonathan Davis is a simple name too, but like Monkey, Head, and Fieldy. I remember when I found out what Fieldy's name stood for, because I always like Head. I think there was like a video of them on a tour bus or something, and someone asked them like, where do the nicknames come from? And Head's like, my name's Brian, but I got a big ass head, so everybody just called me Head when we were growing up. And Monkey, he was like, my name is James, but people told me I look like a monkey, so they fucking nicknamed me Monkey. And they were all friends with Fieldy growing up, and they were like, so Fieldy, where the fuck did you get your name from? And he was like, well, when I was younger, I was fat, so I had really big cheeks, so they used to call me Garfield. And then they started calling me Garf. And then that turned into Field. And then it turned into Fieldy. So I'm fucking Fieldy. And I was like, what? So fucking good. And David Silveria apparently was like an underwear model or a Calvin Klein model or a jeans model, something like that for some point. There was like a big feud between him and Fred Durst, because Fred Durst was calling him out for doing like these Ralph Lauren like jeans photo spreads in like GQ or whatever. And he was like, this fucking guy. Fred Durst, of all people, who made his career out of wearing a fucking red Yankees cap and being from Florida. But go figure, whatever. But Korn, like you said, Korn was the first band to do it, and the first band to really be coined new metal, or to be accepted as like, oh, this is a new style of metal that we're doing. These guys are taking 7-string guitars and tuning those down. So it was just like, I can't even imagine what that was like. Like, you know, when people talk about the reaction of when Captain America picks up the fucking hammer in Endgame, and people talk about that reaction, I wonder if it was the same thing as hearing Blind for the very first time, where you hear like these super down-tuned fucking guitars and the super weird dissonant chords that Korn is known for using. Like, people, when you write new metal, so many people talk about how it's like you've got to have the chunky bounce riffs, but then you've got to have like these dissonant, weird, ambient lines over them too. And no one was really doing that before them. It's not like it wasn't a guitar part. It was almost, and I think of it very much in a hip hop sensibility, almost like they were looking for samples. Like, think of it like a sample. Like, just play this weird fucking noise here.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that you were doing if you were chopping a song together, chopping a beat together. It's like, here's this one riff. Here's the heavy part of the riff. Throw something over that just sounds fucking weird. And that's what the songwriting style was. We're not talking about like in thrash metal even, where you've got a really heavy part, but then you're going to harmonize a lead over it, and it's going to be very musically sound. Yeah. Right? Like, it's going to be very musically appealing. It's as if their goal was to make the worst sounding thing possible. And I mean, they achieved it. Like, it's worst sounding thing possible. Chris, I know you're holding back laughter.
Yeah, it's mission accomplished, bro. Well fucking done.
But I mean, like, the most dissonant thing possible.
Yes.
And then there's going back to Jonathan Davis's voice, right? Where, yeah, it's not a nice voice, but I think that was part of the point. Like, forget the scatting. Forget the like, forget even that part. Just the thing about the nu metal vocal that has always been interesting to me is it was like you had to channel the angstiness that your listener was feeling, but also like that borderline whininess, right? Because we're like 13, 14 listening to this music. The world sucks. And Jonathan Davis's voice very clearly embodies that feeling, right? Like, is that the part of his voice that you don't like?
Yeah, like there's just something, because I was listening to some Korn right before this, and
it's Korn.
Yeah.
A big lump of knobs. Not that.
No. I was listening, and like the beginning of a song I listened to, I'm like, okay, this isn't the Jonathan Davis voice that I hate. And then he went into the voice that I hate. And it's very much it's very much
Give us your impression. Do it. Do it.
It's like, but I don't know any fucking words, so I can't do an impression.
Make it up.
It's just very much like a, like it's a very whiny, it's a very whiny, very annoying sound coming from his mouth. And like, because I think I have no fucking idea what song it was, but I remember seeing a music video, and the image in my head is Jonathan Davis's annoying fucking voice over a visual of his hands running up that mic stand he had of like a robotic woman or some shit.
Yeah, it's like an H.R. Geiger mic stand sort
and
of thing.
So I have this like image in my mind of like his hands running over this like robot, whatever the fuck, and him just like, and I'm like, what the? people enjoy this? Like, this is garbage.
My wife has said the same exact thing. She's like, you give me shit for listening to emo music when I grew up, for listening to like Brand New and All Time Low, but this is what you fucking listen to. And I know I get it, but I think that as like a 12-year-old kid, when you're mad at the world, that's appealing because you're like, he sounds like he is a man in turmoil.
Yeah.
And I think because I got so attached to the music at that age, that's why I didn't mind it so much. Now when I listen to it, when he's singing like, it's gonna be better tomorrow. It's like, and falling away from me. I kind of like, all right, you're laying it on a little thick here. And there's other songs. Yes, there are other songs where he is accentuating that whininess a lot more.
Yeah.
And I think the video that you were talking about was the video for Here to Stay, which is such a good fucking song. I got to see Korn on that tour, the tour for Untouchables, and watching that, I just remember when the music video came out. At that point, I'd been listening to Korn for a few years, and I was really excited that a new album was coming out. And just the super fuzzed out guitar intro, and then it just goes into the riff, doom doom da 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 doom doom doom, and then they like change keys going into the verse. I was like, this is amazing. I fucking loved it, dude. And then seeing that live, like that was my first concert, was seeing them and Disturbed, and like I was just blown away, And I just think that his voice was meant to be as whiny as possible, and it's never been about being appealing, I guess, right? But people fucking love him.
Yeah.
Like, people love his voice. We've joked around before about how on the soundtrack for Queen of the Damned, he's supposed to be the voice of Lestat. Lestat's voice, like if you've read the Queen of the Damned books, he's supposed to have this beautiful angelic voice. And meanwhile, it's Jonathan Davis. Like, when Lestat first comes into the room, I was showing Chris this scene recently. I was like, look at how fucking dumb this is. And fucking, what's his name? Townsend, whatever the dude's name is. He's just laying on top of an amp, like sprawled out, like Burt Reynolds on a fucking bear skin rug. And it's Jonathan Davis's voice coming out. So he's like, and I'm like, that's supposed to be the thing that's making them all go, oh man, your voice, who are you, man? And I'm like, that's dumb. Like, no, you cannot convince me that these people were like, he sounds like an angel. We fucking love it. But talking about like iconic performances from Korn, their Woodstock 99 performance, I think solidifies why they were, this is like at the peak of their popularity, I think at the peak of their career. And this is right after Follow the Leader came out, just before Issues. And seeing this sea of people bounce when they kick into Blind was insane. Have you ever watched any of the footage of them live, like from their prime?
I've probably seen the clip you're talking about from Woodstock 99, because I have seen stuff from Woodstock 99. So, like, I've seen that. Maybe I should watch more with, like, the video on mute. Then maybe I could tolerate it.
I thought you usually reserve that practice for videos with Lady Gaga. But another band who made an impact and a crazy-ass live show during Woodstock 99 was Limp Bizkit. The reason for the season, it was really like my gateway drug into nu metal was Limp Bizkit. In the same way that Jonathan Davis and his voice had that whininess that like I was feeling at that time, Fred Durst from Limp Bizkit was doing the same thing with his like angsty, super, it does sound like a whine sometimes.
Yeah.
I know so many Limp Bizkit lyrics and I can't fucking think of one right now. I don't know why. But it's just it's like that's what he sounds like. To anyone, like if I ask someone who doesn't speak English, what does Limp Bizkit sounds like? That's what it's gonna sound like.
For a moment that also sounded like Rick to Life.
You've got to do your Rick to Life impression for us. Just so that they know what we're talking about. It's very true. He's Chris says he doesn't do impressions, but that's pretty spot on. Along with Fred Durst on vocals in Limp Bizkit, you've got guitarist Wes Borland, the reason why I'm wearing the fucking skeleton onesie, bassist Sam Rivers, his cousin John Otto, take him to the Matthews Bridge on drums, and on turntables, fucking DJ Lethal, who was actually in House of Pain. So yeah, just okay, perfect. So like the weird guitar lines I was talking about before, think of the thing from House of Pain from that song Jump Around. That's what they were like, we need to make guitar sounds like that. But yeah, oh man, I fucking love Limp Bizkit so much. And I'm so happy to see that, like, on all the comments for the YouTube video of their Woodstock performance, so many people commented like, I don't understand why this band ever got so much hate. And I'm like, these are my people. Like, where were you guys 20 years ago when everybody was talking about how this was like the lowest form of music ever? But a lot of that came from the fact that especially Limp Bizkit was mixing so much of the hip hop and rap element together with the metal. And it just like, people did not want their chocolate and their peanut butter mixing. They wanted to keep that shit separate as much as possible. Chris, I know that you have kind of that distinction in your mind between rap metal and nu metal, but given the explanation I gave before with Korn, do you think Limp Bizkit still kind of fits into that box?
I think they do, and I think, like you were just saying, very much the idea of keep your rap out of my metal and keep your metal out of my rap. Calling it rap metal and keeping it separate from nu metal, even though I wasn't even a fan of nu metal, keeping it separate in that way and labeling it its own thing kind of helped me justify it, because I did enjoy a song like Rollin'. I did enjoy... So this song has never been released, but the song Crack Addict was a theme song to WrestleMania 19, something like that.
Do you know a Limp Bizkit song that I don't know?
Apparently. And I very much love this song, Crack Addict. And so it was so funny watching WrestleMania, leading up to WrestleMania. They're like, and Limp Bizkit with the theme song. And my brother like, well, what's the song called? And they never said the name of the song. And I can't remember. I can't remember any of the lyrics right now. Oh, that's what it was. The chorus was something like, right now, let's go, you and me, toe to toe, some shit like that.
Very Limp Bizkit.
Yeah. And so we get to WrestleMania. No one, like, we don't know the name of the song. We're at WrestleMania, and Howard Finkel, the ring announcer, is like, now performing their song, the theme song of WrestleMania, Crack Addict, Limp Bizkit. And we're like, did a man in a tuxedo just say the words, the theme song, Crack Addict? And it turned out the name of the song was Crack Addict, and the second half of the song was Fred Durst repeatedly saying, I'm a crack addict. I'm addicted to crack. Like, it's...
Yeah.
But, like,
yeah,
I enjoyed that song. I enjoyed Rollin'. I seem to remember enjoying the Nookie.
The Nookie.
The Nookie. And then I also just remembered before we started recording, they covered Behind Blue Eyes. And that was my introduction to that song. And then
really,
I hear that, and I'm like, that's a good song. And it's like The Who sings that fucking song. And I'm like, okay, that version's better, but like that's how I got to that song. So it's to come back to the original point, is Limp Bizkit nu metal? Looking back, I can say yes, they're 100% nu metal, you know, because the guitar sounds and the way they're playing and the style they're playing, even though I've always thought of it as rap metal,
right?
They're the only band that applies to, you know? So what you can say is that they're nu metal, but they borrow more from rap and hip hop than other nu metal bands do. And they even though he's not very good at it, there's a lot more rapping going on in Limp Bizkit than there is in really any other nu metal bands.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, okay. So it was very much like white boy rap was what the term was that would get like thrown around all the time about bands like this. Because it was like, okay, he's trying to rap. He's listened to some rap albums in the past, but he's not very good. And if you want an example of Durst not being good at rapping, just fucking the song Show Me What You Got. The whole section where he's naming different states and rhyming things with them. It's real bad. It's really fucking bad. But then you've got where when he gets into his flow, he's actually really good. Like on a song like Living It Up. Not only are his raps in this fucking song really good, but the intro is so indicative of the time that this album came out. So I think Chocolate Starfish came out in like 2001, 2002, something like that.
Yeah.
And the song starts with, "This is dedicated to you, Ben Stiller. You are my favorite motherfucker." Like, who even talks about Ben Stiller these days? And then it goes into it and like, "Drama makes the world go around. Does anybody got a problem with that?" That was fucking Fred Durst. You know, "My business is my business. Who's guilty? Can I get a witness?" That's Fred Durst. Like that shit I know like the back of my fucking hand. I fucking love it. But like I grew up not listening to rap. I grew up in the era, like I had it written all over my notebooks and my fucking binders and my backpack. You can't spell rap without crap. Or you can't just flip that, scratch it, reverse it. And like I hated hip hop. And meanwhile, my favorite band at the time was borrowing so much from hip hop, where like I'm glad that I've grown up and that I've matured and been able to appreciate hip hop for what it is and listen to not a lot of it, but I'm way more open to it than I was now at 30 something than I was at fucking 12 years old, you know? And the thing was, it made me feel like I kind of had something in common with my peers because I was listening to Slipknot and I was listening to Metallica and I was listening to, you know, what I thought were the heaviest bands in the world. And meanwhile, everybody's listening to like G-Unit and, you know, like Lil Wayne. And I just didn't click. But meanwhile, like we had something where I could be like, oh, I listen to one guy that raps. I don't like Eminem, but I listen to one white guy that raps. And I loved it. And I wanted to fucking be Fred Durst and Wes Borland. I love Wes Borland so much. It's like I said, it's the reason I stole this freaking thing, the bunny. And I was just so enamored with his onstage persona, with the different makeups and the contacts and the costumes and everything. And I was like, oh, that's me. That's the fucking, I'm the weirdo. Like I'm like that clip from fucking Riverdale. Like I'm a weirdo. Okay. Like I wear this stupid hat. I'm a loner dotty. Where that's how I felt. And like, as much as I love Wes Borland, he writes the same riff again and again. So like, if you look at the breakdown riff in My Generation and the breakdown riff in Counterfeit are pretty much the same thing. It's like, and like for anybody that fucking plays guitar, you know what that sounds like. Or anybody that's heard the songs, you know what that sounds like. Like that's guitar speak. Like that guy on TikTok that does like when a drummer meets another drummer. I fucking love those. Those are so fucking funny. You take those two songs as an example. You take the intro riff for Hot Dog, Golden Cobra, and Dirty Rotten Biscuit. They're all the same sort of flavor, that flavor being hot dog. but even so, they're so good. It's like that's his signature thing is the fucking, you know, we're going to dive the whammy bar and then we're going to pull up on it and hit these octave chords and stuff. And it's going to sound really dissonant and super heavy. So Fred and Wes were the visual appeal for the band. They were the ones that were always up front and always stood out. You know, Wes with the makeup and Fred with the cap. But John Otto and Sam Rivers, the bass player and the drummer, were the fucking backbone because that band was so groove heavy that without them, it would be nothing. There's a reason why he screams out, "John Otto, take him to the Matthews Bridge." It's just so hip hop influenced. The intro to the drum intro to My Generation, the drum intro to Show Me What You Got. No, I'm sorry, not Show Me What You Got, to Just Like This. You know, it's that's hip hop. It's a fucking break beat being played on live drums. So you're absolutely right. They were the most rap influenced of all the different bands. And DJ Lethal is just, I mean, he was fucking, it's DJ Lethal. Yeah. He was in House of Pain. I don't know what to say about him, you know? One really funny thing, talking about like the groove and the heaviness that I loved was, you know, watching that Woodstock footage. In between two songs, they go into this riff, this really crazy like thrash riff. And then Fred is like, I want to see everybody jump, blah, blah, blah. So then they start and it goes into it and the drums and the bass kick in and it's super heavy. And then Fred is just doing like the 90s hip hop fucking walk across the stage. And he just screams, thieves, thieves and liars. And I'm like, what fucking song is this? What Limp Bizkit song is this? I don't know this song. I know their whole catalog. And I was racking my brain because this is the first time that I'd watched that footage in full. And I was like, what song is this? So I'm looking through all their fucking albums. I'm looking through all their EPs, all their singles, all the compilations they've been on, all the soundtracks they've been on. I'm like, what is this song? It's a fucking Ministry cover. It's Thieves by Ministry. And I had no idea. I'd never heard this song before, but it's all I've been listening to all week now. Have you ever heard that song?
I don't think I have. It's
so
my
good.
My Ministry exposure is very limited. It's, you know, Jesus built my hot rod and no W. So,
but I mean, the coolest thing about it is that like you had those moments of Limp Bizkit, but then you also had like emotional songs. They would always have like a ballad on an album or something. You'd get like Rearranged and Boiler and The One, which are such good examples. So you had the balance between something like Break Stuff and then something like Rearranged, which is so fucking good. And they actually had some rap street cred, because if you've got a song with Method Man on it, a song that's fucking phenomenal, like All Together Now is so fucking good. And there's a line in it that Method Man says. He goes, where'd you get that monster? She beautiful. I say that to my wife all the time. Like as a compliment. In my head, it's a compliment. It's like, damn, girl. But she has no idea what I'm doing. I say it to her all the time. I say it to her all the fucking time. But it's I mean, you have Method Man on a fucking album. One of the Wu-Tang Clan on your album. And like, it was just, that was so cool to me. And that's part of why I felt like, okay, cool. I kind of listen to rap, kind of, sort of, you know, not like the other time that I got in trouble for trying to quote Linkin Park rap in my history class. Yeah. Chris, before I tell that embarrassing story, what was your experience and exposure to Linkin Park?
I think my exposure to Linkin Park was actually the song One Step Closer, but the person introducing me to the song didn't know the name of the song. They just knew, yeah, Chester just starts yelling, like, shut up in the middle of the song. And he's, like, hanging upside down in the music video. And I'm like, okay. So I watched the music video and I listened to the song. I'm like, okay, yeah, I can get into this. And I know right. It was, like, One Step Closer and then Crawling were, like, the two songs that I heard.
Yeah.
And me and my brother decide we need to get this album, Hybrid Theory, and we listened to that album, and I listened to that album a lot. You know, like we talked about in the What's Old is New episode, Linkin Park is the one new metal band that I actually really liked and really enjoyed listening to and would regularly listen to. And Hybrid Theory was a big part of that. I would listen to that album back to front all the time. And
yeah, same.
While there was some of that hip-hop influence, it wasn't as prevalent, and it felt more just like heavier rock music that occasionally has some rapping in it. And that occasionally has like Mr. Han on the turntables and everything like that. Yeah. It was mostly just the really heavy music. And then, who's it, the guitar player, Phoenix, with the fucking headphones on all the time. I always thought that was really cool.
That was guitarist Brad Delson, yeah.
So it was like those things that I thought was cool about the band, and that it was heavier than some of the other music I was into at the time as well, because I was getting into a band like Sum 41 who came out at the same time, and while they're good and while I loved them, that was pop punk and this was actually metal. And
Yeah.
I liked finding something that was metal other than I Disappear by Metallica.
Yeah, I had that same sort of experience where I can remember when I first saw the video for One Step Closer. And the fact that it was Chester had like his bleach blonde yellow hair spiked up, and Mike Shinoda had his like most vibrant of vibrant Manic Panic red in his hair at the time. And that was like the cool, because at the time I was doing like Liberty spikes. I would fucking spike up my hair and stuff like that before school every fucking day. So I looked more good Charlotte than I looked metal, I guess. But whatever, I thought it was cool. And hearing One Step Closer, I was just talking about it recently where like this is the embodiment of what it's like to be a teenager.
Yeah.
So many of their choruses or like bridges are just sections where Chester's just screaming, "Shut up." Like, and what better way to channel how you feel as a teen than to just have the singer of this new band who's got these like flame tattoos up his forearm, like he's a dude that just got fucking poison ivy or something, just screaming "shut up" into the microphone the whole time. That's a little inside joke for Chris and I.
Oh boy.
But yeah, it was so exciting to be able to see this band who, yes, they were not as hip hop influenced as Limp Bizkit was, because like, yeah, Limp Bizkit was maybe a rap metal band.
Yeah.
But Linkin Park was the most commercially successful of this whole entire group as well, because they were, again, like I said about the Beastie Boys, less threatening. They had, in the end, they had Crawling. So these were like ballady type songs that was like easier to get on the radio.
Yeah.
But then you had something like Points of Authority, which was, I think that was the song that I had brought in. So we had to talk about a hip hop lyric that we liked in our history class. The teacher asked us to bring in a hip hop lyric. So the next day I just bring in "Forfeit the game before somebody else takes you," or whatever it is.
Yeah.
"And put your name to shame, cover up your face. You can't run the race. The pace is too fast. You just won't last." And I was like, there you go. And she's like, "What was that?" And I was like, "It's Linkin Park." And she's like, "Of course you would bring in that." I was like, what the fuck is that supposed to mean? I was like, this is all I, like, this is the only hip hop I know. But to me, it was a flow. To me, there was that bounce to it. And it was kind of my only way to relate to what we were talking about. So I was just kind of just made to feel like the weird kid, because I brought in a rap metal song as my example for the only thing I know about hip hop.
And it could have been worse. You could have brought in, "I know y'all be loving this shit right here.
Bang.
Limp Bizkit is right here. I'm really impressed with Fred Durst's ability to rhyme here with here."
Listen, if Ozzy can do it with masses and masses, Fred can do it with here and here. But yeah, like all of the elements that came together, where you had Chester's beautiful fucking voice. Like he had a way better voice than Jonathan Davis. And he could actually sing. For a while, he actually sang for Stone Temple Pilots, too, which was fucking awesome. Like, his loss is such a big hole in the music world.
Yeah.
And because Hybrid Theory had such an impact. And I know that, like, I can't imagine what it must have been like to just constantly be hearing, like, "Oh, we really love Hybrid Theory. Wish you would do that album that you did 20 years ago today." And it's like, that's got to get tiresome after a while. And I mean, I'm guilty of it too, because past the first two albums, I mean, in all honesty, past Hybrid Theory, I didn't really listen to anything else by them. Meteora, I liked a couple of the songs that were like big hits on Meteora. Songs like
Faint, Numb, Somewhere I Belong.
Yeah.
Breaking
songs
the
like
Habit.
Somewhere I Belong and Faint and Breaking the Habit. And I think Don't Stay was another one off of that. Don't Stay, I think, was the opener, because it was like a sample of someone like hitting a bottle on the sidewalk, and then the bottle breaks and it kicks off like the drum loop, which was really cool. But beyond that, I didn't really listen to them, because then I felt like they went into their emo phase. I wrote them off, because I was like, oh, they're no longer the style of music that they made popular, which is why I will say Linkin Park is the Metallica of the nu metal big four. They were the most commercially successful of the bunch, and they put out 2 really fucking solid albums and then completely changed up their style. And the fan base still loved them.
Yeah.
Like, I would have still gladly gone to see them live. I fortunately got to see them live during the Meteora cycle, but they were never that nu metal band again past that point.
Yeah.
You know, and a song like Bleed It Out is way better than I gave it credit for when it first came out. When I first heard it, I was like, this fucking sucks. This is stupid. I hated the music video for it. I remember when they did Encore/Numb, like the mashup that they did with Jay-Z. I hated it.
Yeah.
I hated it because, again, I liked having the hip hop influence, but I didn't want to listen to rap. I didn't want to listen to hip hop. Meanwhile, cut to today where I'm like, I fucking love Jay-Z. Like his first album, fucking Dead Presidents, The Evils, Hard Knock Life, on to the next one. Like, those songs are so fucking good, and I fucking love Jay-Z. But at the time, I was not about it at all. I didn't want a Jay-Z song with Linkin Park on it. It made me so angry because I felt like they were just changing up their style to be more popular. But going back and listening to their later albums now, I can definitely give them not a pass, but I can be more forgiving as to what they were trying to do because they were just trying to change up their style. Yes, you've got bands like Overkill that can do the same thing for this long, but it's because they're doing it really, really fucking well.
Yeah.
Consistently. Do you get where I'm coming from and trying to dub them the Metallica of this group?
I do understand what you're getting at, and it makes a lot of sense. And I think similarly, I loved Hybrid Theory. I really enjoyed Meteora. There's a lot of songs off of those 2 albums I love. 2007, they come out with Minutes to Midnight, which I did not like, and I haven't listened to anything that they've put out since then. And even the collaboration with Jay-Z, and they basically re-released Hybrid Theory, but made it sound more electronic or had hip hop or whatever it was. And I was like, this is dumb. You're just releasing the same album again, but worse.
Yeah.
But I see what you're saying, where it's they had these 2 albums, like Hybrid Theory was really good nu metal, and Meteora, they changed it up a little bit. You know, a song like Breaking the Habit was very much a ballad, and then after that, they kind of changed with the times or changed to what was commercially successful.
There's a fucking Transformers meme now. What I've done, like every fucking movie ended with that fucking song around that time, and I was sick of it. That's their Enter Sandman.
Yeah, I guess so. But I think the other thing that I look at is when we talk about Korn and we talk about Limp Bizkit, they started in the 90s and released music in the 90s. So they were kind of inventing and perfecting nu metal before Linkin Park even released an album. And so even though Linkin Park, we can say, yes, they're a commercially successful nu metal band, it almost felt like they were late to the party, and that's why they changed. Because Korn had their notoriety before Linkin Park.
Yes,
Limp Bizkit had their notoriety before Linkin Park. Nu metal was a thing before Linkin Park came along. They just took what worked, released a very heavy, very metal nu metal album in Hybrid Theory, and then went off and changed because they came out with a nu metal album as everyone was like, nu metal fucking sucks. Get this shit out of here. It's like,
that's
wait,
fair.
guys, we just got here. You can't tell me I suck already. And so I think that's probably part of the reason why they changed their sound and evolved.
I was going to make espressos.
You know, it was almost like they came out with the album that very much has all the elements of nu metal, but it was a little too late for them to really do anything innovative with it.
Sure.
It was almost like they perfected it, and they released really great music, and they had great lyrics that were very angsty and appealed to teenagers around the world, and they had that very small window where they were the perfect nu metal band, and then everyone collectively decided that nu metal is the worst genre of music in the history of music, and they had to kind of sort of abandon it and evolve in their own way.
Yeah. I didn't even think of that, the fact that they were coming into it at the tail end. Because, I mean, nu metal was still a thing probably until like 2007, 2008, but you were seeing less and less of it, and it was that by that point the butt of so many jokes.
Yeah.
So it makes sense for them to have said, okay, well, we've done everything that we can. The genre has been perfected. Largely, we perfected it on that first album. And now we want to do new and innovative things as artists, which you can't blame them for.
Yeah.
You know, I say the same thing about Metallica. Do I wish that Metallica was still releasing fucking Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets and fucking Justice right now? Yeah, but it's not going to happen.
No.
Some bands just do not want to create the same exact thing for 40 plus years. And so I understand why they were branching out and evolving. And I'm glad that I took the opportunity to go back and try to give it another listen, because it's not all as bad as I thought it was. I think I was just hurt because it was like, oh, this was one of the first bands that I got into, that I found, that I heard about, even though they were like the most fucking popular band in the world. It's not like I was discovering somebody underground, but it felt very much like that.
Yeah.
Because the chorus was just fucking shut up. Because the whole bridge was just shut up. I was like, no, I had this connection with you guys. And I guess if I wanted the more aggressive music and I wanted something that felt like it was just in your face and angry, that's where Slipknot came in.
Yep.
And Slipknot was probably the extreme of extremes when it came to nu metal. They were the band that brought all of the visual elements that you saw other nu metal bands doing, and they fucking perfected it.
Yeah.
I'm sure that everyone in Mushroomhead is yelling at me right now because I know that whole fucking thing. But Slipknot really, in those early days, perfected the whole entire, we are one solid unit. We are all wearing the jumpsuits, and the personality is coming out through these masks that seem somewhat mundane. I think we talked about that in our Masked Men episode, where they weren't scary masks. They were just like everyday masks.
Yeah.
That seemed creepy because they were dudes doing the fucking nu metal dance. They were doing the fucking twisting the head and like turning it side to side and like staring at you and like making weird eye contact sort of thing. And that's what made it off-putting.
Yeah.
Not what the mask actually was. And to get into Slipknot a little bit, their lineup, if you have time, consisted of on turntables, number 0, Sid Wilson. And we're talking about the OG Slipknot here. You know, if you've listened to this show for 50 some odd episodes, you know we talk about OG lineups. So on drums, it was number 1, Joey Jordison. On bass, number 2, Paul Gray. On percussion, number 3, Chris Fain. On guitar, number 4, Jim Root. On samples and keys was, and probably still is, for everyone fucking wondering, was number 5, Craig Jones. On percussion, number 6, Sean Clown Crayon. On guitar, second guitar, number 7, Mick Thompson. And the singer, the great big mouth himself, number 8, Corey Taylor. And they were just fascinating. They were fascinating to watch because if they weren't playing an instrument at the time, they were beating each other up on stage. They were just running around, fucking rolling on top of one another. It was like watching a Rat King become what it is, and they're just tangling their tails up. And it's just like the most fucking fascinating thing. Like they were, on one hand, so in your face and chaotic, and on the other hand, it was just so impressive to be able to have a ska band with 9 guys running around in clown costumes. Chris, since you said that Slipknot is basically just a ska band, I can't get it out of my head.
I mean, I think they meet almost all the criteria, the most important being having way too many members in the band. Like, it's, if you put one of them in checkered print, they're instantly a ska band. There's just way too many fucking guys up there.
But yeah, especially in the early days, it was just pure chaos. Like watching their like Dynamo performance or Tattoo the Earth or their Ozfest performance, it really is impressive to see just how insane their live shows were, but how they were still able to keep it together and choreograph it in a way that still felt very unified, right?
Yeah.
It still felt like, oh, this is the way that the show is supposed to go. Like, this is what we do. And in those early days too, Slipknot had a lot of the hip hop influence. You had Corey kind of rapping lyrics in songs like No Life and Spit It Out. Like raps that to this day I can't get every single fucking word because it's just so fucking fast. You know, he shouts out Chuck D in No Life. Like that's a cool fucking line, and that's the one that I always hit. I think that's the opening line of the song. Where's Chuck D when you need him? You ain't shit to the bottom of it. Psycho. It's like that's how I know it, and then it gets into the fucking chorus, and it's just so insane, and I loved that. And another big element of Slipknot, especially back then, was the kegs.
Yes,
like the kegs were the thing that everyone made fun of, right?
Yeah.
That's where. I guess memes before they were memes, but everyone would make fun of the fact that they had a dude dressed as a clown going around and hitting a keg with a baseball bat.
Yeah.
But it was just another percussive instrument. And it's like, when you've got 9 guys on stage, you need something for them to do. Like, so if they're going to be playing these big timpani style drums, right? These big drums that Clown had basically made in the early days, why not have a fucking keg on there, right? To accent the fucking like breakdown as it starts or something. Like, you've got a guy on the turntables doing like scratching on the turntables. You've got another dude with fucking spikes coming out of his helmet doing samples and shit. You're gonna need to have something high end to accent the beginning of that breakdown. Right? Especially because they tuned so low, so everything was so bass heavy, so you had something with a little bit of that higher end attack. And it wasn't the only time that we've had like music made out of pots and pans. If you look at Depeche Mode and People Are People, that was like a huge fucking hit. And that song is just, they went into the kitchen to the studio and they were like, all right, let's just record us banging on all this shit and make a beat out of it. So it's not as alien as it sounds, but when it's 9 guys in costumes and masks, latex masks, it's fucking weird.
Yeah.
Were you like big into Slipknot when they first came out?
I liked the Heretics Anthem.
Okay.
And that was it. I think I had heard Wait and Bleed, and I think I owned Iowa and never listened to it. You know, it's weird. I don't know why I didn't really listen to Slipknot, but like, I didn't, even though I liked the Heretic Anthem, and eventually I liked Duality when that came out.
Right.
I almost wonder if by the time I was realizing like, hey, maybe I might actually like Slipknot, I had moved on to other bands. Okay. And so I never kind of went back, because I feel like even though I liked the Heretic Anthem, I feel like it was Duality that I was really like, wow, I actually really like this music. But by that point, I like, what year? That had to be like 2003 or something like that, right?
Duality? No, that was later than that. I think Iowa wasn't until like 2002, 2003. Duality was, I was in high school, so that had to be like 05, 06.
All right, so if that was 05, I was definitely at that point listening to Slayer and Metallica and Anthrax and
right.
Just discovering Exodus and maybe listening to an Overkill song. So I had, it was almost like by the time I realized I should have been listening to Slipknot this whole time, I had already grown out of Slipknot. I was already like, well, I'm over the new metal phase. Like I skipped that part of becoming a metalhead. I did a new metal speed run where I liked Heretic Anthem. And then I moved
one step closer, and that was it.
Yeah, and then I liked some of the singles, and that was it. So, like, even though Slipknot was, I would say, the most metal of the bands we're talking about, and was definitely a band that I probably would have really liked at the time.
Right.
For whatever reason, I just kind of skipped over them, and maybe it was I was too distracted by, like, Disturbed or Mudvayne or even Linkin Park. And at the same time getting into pop punk. I'm listening to Sum 41. I'm listening to the other bands that the guys from Blink-182 are in, but not Blink-182. I'm listening to I'm listening to Rancid. You know, I just, for whatever reason, just skipped over Slipknot. And now that they're a ska band, at the beginning of the episode, I talked about my love of ska. Maybe I should revisit Slipknot in all
there
their
you go.
in all their ska band glory, because
keep that in mind.
There's
and it'll make it
9
easier.
guys in the band, so that automatically makes them a ska band.
I mean, I won't argue with you there. And yeah, I mean, my experience with Slipknot, like I said, was very much, okay, I have found something that is channeling all of the anger that I'm feeling. Where Jonathan Davis and Fred Durst had that bit of whininess in their voice, which was like the I'm so fucking mad I could fucking cry right now. Like I'm arguing with you, but I'm trying not to cry. Like that sort of feeling. Like I don't want to do my homework, Mom. Then you had Corey Taylor and his fucking voice. I mean, everybody talks about, like, Iowa is such a legendary album because it was Corey at his most ferocious. And you can hear that. And there's a reason why he can't scream like that anymore. And he wasn't doing it correctly, but it was all the rage and all the anger that you felt. And even on the self-titled album, when he screams, I've talked about it before on the song Get This, you know, where you get, give me a scream, Corey. And it's just, like fucking, it's insane. And I wish I could scream like that. But it's just channeling that anger and aggression. And then, like, to lay the groundwork for all that, you had Joey Jordison with his fucking drum skills. Yeah. Who, this dude was so fucking good. Like, just the double pedal. Like, I remember seeing on their VHS, Welcome to the Neighborhood or something like that. Like, welcome to our sick, sad world. And it was like just a video of like Slipknot, like a promo video for Slipknot. They had the videos for Spit It Out, Wait and Bleed, like a Wait and Bleed live video, and the video for Surfacing. And in between all that, it's just them talking. Like, I remember I think they asked them, like, how would you describe the music? And then it's just Mick with the fucking hockey mask, brutal. And that's it. Like, it's just that clip, brutal. And then it moves on to something else. And they have clips of Joey playing the drums. And it's just the fucking tom rolls and his speed with his hands and his feet. He was literally like 5 feet of nothing but caffeine or cocaine or something that was keeping him fucking going. And it was just so fucking fast. And like, it was incredible to then have that accented with the bigger drums that Clown and Chris were playing. And it just made it feel larger than life. It made it feel, you feel like you're listening to 9 guys on stage. You know what I mean? Like, they found a way to really get it across that you are listening to 9 madmen on stage creating this controlled chaos. And it was all of the aggression that you got from Korn and Limp Bizkit and Chester screaming, "Shut up." And they just molded it and made it this perfect thing. And even now, their career has lasted, you know, we're going on 20 plus years. Yeah. And they have been able to retain a lot of that aggression while also going way more commercial, or I don't want to say softening up, because they haven't. Like, I feel like that's a really common critique of these bands, that, oh, they got soft. Like, do I listen to a lot of Korn's newer stuff? Like, no, I don't listen to anything beyond Untouchables. Some of their really new stuff is good, but it's maybe because I've aged out of wanting to listen to that stuff. Yeah. Like, I like the classics that I got attached to. Slipknot, however, has managed to they haven't softened up. They've just experimented more. But, I mean, a song like AOV, a song like Custer, which, again, it shows you how much I'm on fucking TikTok. The fucking meme of, like, the girls dancing to Custer and people being mad about it is so fucking funny because it just fucking works. The rhythm works. And there's, like, a guy that does, like, the Gangnam Style dance to the riff, too. It's so good. But, like, songs like that are clear examples. Oh, they have a song on their newest album called Hell. It's, like, H377. That's the best fucking song on that album. And it's so angry and so aggressive. So, like, anyone that says that Slipknot has softened up is just full of shit. Like, you're not giving the newer material enough of a chance, I think. And did I love their latest album? No, absolutely not. But I can see that they are still doing Slipknot. Slipknot will never stop doing Slipknot. They're going to just keep doing what they do, whether that's the experimentation that they dive into takes it outside of what you want to listen to is a completely different thing. And I think that's just part of what you're going to get with any band that you get attached to when you're 12 or 13 years old.
Yeah.
I'm sure that a lot of our listeners can relate to the fact of having to come to terms with like, oh, do I not really like this music as much as I did back then? And is it really just nostalgic? I don't think there's anything wrong with that, though, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I think I've talked about how nu metal wasn't my thing. It was always pop punk. And
Right.
I have that nostalgia for that music. And there are still bands writing pop punk music. Some of the bands I listened to back then are still around. Sum 41 isn't. They are breaking up. But
Rest in peace, rest in peace.
but you have newer pop punk, or you have pop punk that has come out since I was really into it and then moved on. And similarly, I will listen to the music that I listened to when I was 13 or 14 years old, but I won't necessarily listen to what those bands are doing now, or I'm not listening to new bands that are coming out now. And it's not even because I think the music is bad. It's just, it appealed to me as a teenager. It doesn't appeal to me as a 30-something-year-old adult.
Right.
And
Right.
it is that nostalgia, and it is that these bands know who their audience is, and for the people that have stuck with them, the people that have listened to Slipknot nonstop for the past 20 years, they're probably still loving this, and they're the fans that are still there. But I think you can also have younger people getting into Slipknot as well, because angsty teens are angsty teens no matter what year it is.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, we were lucky to have this style of music coming out at that time in our lifetime, but kids that are growing up now, if they find that music now, it's like, okay, the music is 20 years old, but it still speaks to them in the same way.
Yeah.
And so you still have those brand new fans coming in and excited to see that this band is still putting out music.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So at the top of the episode, I mentioned that there were at least two bands that came up a lot in the comments when we posted the clip about the big four of nu metal being Korn, Limp Bizkit, Linkin Park, and Slipknot. And I guess the most prevalent one was Deftones, which I didn't have that connection with Deftones when I was younger, when I was first getting into the style of music. So I get it, and I think if I had more of a connection with Deftones, I would have put them in here.
Yeah.
I guess it just comes down to, I feel like they were still on the fringes of alternative metal. It wasn't quite nu metal, because they were also doing really weird ambient, almost like borderline shoegaze type stuff. Like if you took the Cocteau Twins and just made them that much fucking heavier, it would just be Deftones. And Mudvayne. Mudvayne is the other one who I love Mudvayne, but I could only have four, so that's that's why I picked the four that I did. But, Chris, do you think that these four bands truly cover the influence and the impact that a big four should have?
I think they absolutely do. Going back to some of the things I was saying when talking about Linkin Park, you know, Korn and Limp Bizkit were creating this sound in the late 90s, even Slipknot coming out in 99. Yes, it was the tail end of the 90s, but that was when the sound was being created. You know, a band like Linkin Park, in our opinion, or at least in my opinion, kind of perfected what nu metal was all about, combining both the hip hop and the metal in 2000. You know, other bands that I think of, you know, Mudvayne, LD50 came out in 2000, right? You know, even a band that I did enjoy, Disturbed, similar to Slipknot, I think their albums came out in I think Down With the Sickness was like 98 or 99, because I know I was really into Believe, that came out in 2000. And they were strictly the metal of nu metal, and I think that's why, even though like you can kind of sort of say a band like Disturbed might be nu metal, it's more of just that alternative metal. You know?
Yeah.
And I think even Mudvayne, as much as I enjoyed Mudvayne, and as much as, you know, you could get those weird sounds, it was all the metal of nu metal.
Yes.
And it's the more we talk about nu metal and the more we discuss what makes the genre what it is, I think you do need just a little bit of that hip-hop influence to really be nu metal. Right. And I think that's why the bands that we have here do represent who the big four of nu metal should be, because they have all of those elements and they were early enough in the genesis of the genre to be considered nu metal. You know, other bands that came after them are playing the music, but that doesn't mean they belong in the big four. It might be music that I prefer, but that doesn't put them in the big four. They might be in my big four, but if we're going to put together the nu metal big four, it's hard to include some of those bands. It's hard to, at least for me, to make an argument why any of these bands that we've talked about today shouldn't be in the big four of nu metal. John, I just realized, looking at your Wes Borland costume, it reminded me of a headline I just saw that Wes Borland's 23andMe just came back, and it turns out he's actually a member of Mudvayne.
It's very true. This is very true. The rumors have always been there, but I'm glad that we finally have confirmation. And with that point, Chris, do you have a suggestion for us for this week?
I absolutely have a suggestion this week. My suggestion is don't listen to any of the nu metal music we've been talking about.
Okay.
But I am going to bring it back to what I talked about at the beginning of the episode, talking about third wave ska and how Slipknot is a ska band. I recommend everyone check out one of the greatest third wave ska bands, Real Big Fish, and their album from 1996, Turn the Radio Off. I
love it.
If you know Real Big Fish at all, it's probably the opening track of this album, Sell Out, which is a phenomenal song. You also have great songs like Trendy, Beer, She Has a Girlfriend Now, and one of my all-time favorite songs, Everything Sucks. It's just a lot of fun. It's third wave ska. It's all the things that I love about third wave ska, which is really upbeat music and really negative lyrics and lyrical content. Like, it is, the lyrics are a fucking bummer, but the music sounds like so much fun.
It made me think of the new movie Renfield with Nick Cage playing Dracula. There's a scene, I might have sent it to you. There's a scene in the support group that Renfield is in, and the person speaking is talking about how they're dating like a really shitty person and how he's like into ska. And like one of the other people in the group is like, ska? You mean like the music with like the horns where people are like dancing around and they wear like silly caps and stuff? And she's like, it's so much more than that. It's really a melding of the influences and like especially third wave ska. And she goes, oh my God, who am I? So good. That movie's a fucking trip. It's not amazing, but it's Nicolas Cage. Come on, go watch Vampires Kiss and then watch Renfield. That's my suggestion. But no, in all seriousness, my suggestion for this week is to go out and check out the band Discrepancies. They are really fucking cool. When we did our What's Old is New episode, I got to talk about a lot of new modern nu metal, and these were some guys that were not on my radar just yet. And I found them through just trying to find some more modern nu metal. So if you love our nu metal big four and you're looking for something that's going to encompass a lot of those elements, the band Discrepancies is the perfect example. Their song Undertow and Control off of their The Rise album is great. They also have a really cool song called The Art of War and another song called Not Alone, which Not Alone has such a Linkin Park feel to it. It feels like something that Chester and Mike Shinoda would have done together. And they're just a really good time. So if you're looking for some cool modern nu metal to check out, to maybe make up your own nu metal big four, check out the band Discrepancies. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Scrap Metal Podcast. The time has come for us to pack up our gear, but we'll be back to rock out with you in the next episode.
Stay metal, everyone.
Good night!